Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. On the 22nd of November, 1963, John F. Kennedy died at the hands of an assassin in Dallas, Texas. The writer Aldous Huxley also died on that date, as too did one of the greatest Christian thinkers and writers of the last century, or indeed any century. This man's books still sell in their millions right across the world, and what's more, they're read by people of all ages. This man was C.S. Lewis. Clive Staples Lewis was born in Belfast in November 1998. His mother, whom he and his brothers loved dearly, died when he was 10 years old. He was educated at private schools and then was accepted into University College, Oxford. His studies were interrupted by the First World War. He was wounded in battle and was repatriated to England, after which he resumed his studies. He was fearsomely bright and took up an academic life. Lewis at this time was an atheist. In 1931, after an afternoon walk with J.R. Tolkien, his friend and fellow scholar and a devout Roman Catholic, he became a Christian, and the following Sunday went to an Anglican church to receive Holy Communion. He had come to the conclusion that the Christian story was a true story. During the Second World War, Lewis made regular broadcasts on the radio. These were live and sometimes came over the airways as bombing raids were taking place. His talks were very popular and were listened to by many millions of people. They form part of his book, Mere Christianity, which has sold millions of copies and is still a bestseller today. Relatively late in life, at the age of 58, he married an American woman, Joy Davidson. They were married for just 3 years. Joy died in 1960, and Lewis was left to bring up her 2 boys. Consumed by grief, Lewis wrote one of his most famous books, A Grief Observed. It's an angry, raw outpouring of loss and anger at God. Lewis did not lose his faith. He nearly did, but in fact his faith only became stronger. Lewis died 3 days later, survived by his brother Warnie and Joy's 2 boys. Lewis lives on because of his writing about Christianity and in his defense of God and the Christian faith. In the 50s, Lewis wrote a book for children, which has become one of the most famous books in all literature, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the first of the Narnia Chronicles, so called because they're all set in the fictional land of Narnia. In these books, Lewis brought the Christian story to life, and the books also contain much of what Lewis believed about God. In his writings, Lewis worked towards giving people a vision of Christianity, rather than giving them an argument for Christianity as truth. As you read the Narnia stories, you find that each character has their own individual story, and each character is given significance through their becoming a greater part of the story of Narnia. For Lewis, faith is about allowing our own story to become a part of the bigger picture. Lewis is still so popular today because his writings, his stories, are still able to connect with ordinary people. And they also carry long-held beliefs built on deep roots that have been forged over the centuries. For Lewis, the past has to be built on and learned from as it becomes the present and informs the future. I first came across The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe when I was 10 years old. We were read the first chapter in school, and then we were asked to write about what we thought that Lucy finds, or would find, as she steps through the back of the wardrobe. I can't remember what I wrote, but I do remember that I wanted to find out what Lewis had put behind the wardrobe, and that is the power of a good story. In this book, you get Lewis telling the Christian story with its message of hope. As Lucy steps out of the back of the wardrobe into Narnia, she finds herself in a land held in perpetual winter by the White Witch, who gives this wintry world no hope of spring. We also meet the beavers, who tell of a place where stone statues stand. These statues are the dead of Narnia. The beavers also speak about Aslan, the stranger, whose coming will end the long winter and bring spring and new life to Narnia. Aslan is a lion, and he will give his life as a sacrifice on the stone altar at Caer Paravel in order to save the life of the selfish boy Edmund. In the Chronicles of Narnia, we find the things which make us human. Here is the Christian story retold in stories rather than in debate and argument. But Lewis's philosophy and theology runs throughout the 7 books. The line "The Witch and the Wardrobe" is a wonderful introduction to the Christian faith, one of the best introductions perhaps ever written. It is about faith, belief, grace, love, hope, and the realization of another world which lives around and beyond the shadowlands of the one we know, a place we only find and only can discover through faith. Jesus said, "Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away." As long as there are Christian writers and thinkers like Lewis, the Christian faith is in good hands. With churches closed to us over the past months, when many need them perhaps more than they ever did, I hope that their doors will soon be opened, so that those who wish to are able once again to walk through them and to stand on holy ground, and perhaps for others who have never walked through them to discover a sacred space that they never knew really existed, and just like the children who walk through the back of the wardrobe, find a truth which lies beyond all comprehension. And in my opinion, that is why I believe that sacred spaces should always, whenever possible, be open to those who feel the need to stand on holy ground.